There's a gentleman who's very persistent, and he's been asking me for some time to say something about bare knuckle, what my perception is of bare knuckle. Before I tell you how I got into it and a little bit about my first experience um, boxing bare knuckle, I want to say I do watch the BKFC. One of my issues, though, with bare knuckle itself, you will learn about when I tell you some of the things that is unique about bare knuckle. But I will say here that one of the issues is that the many of the participants have not gotten are not very at ease, and I don't think you can ever get totally at ease with looking at a bare fist. But most of the participants, I would say, I would say most. In all fairness, I had to think about it, and particularly in the BKFC, which is the UFC of bare knuckle, most of them have not, and it's not easy to do, but most of them have not gotten used to looking at the bare knuckle, and you'll understand what I mean when I go a little more in depth. I do want to say here, though, that there are very few things that are more comforting than being authentic, than being yourself. And in that vein, I want to say something about my personal first experience in bare knuckle, because I did mention that I had my first bare knuckle match when I was 12. That gives the impression that the person you see that many people think is relatively tough, that person was always the case. I would say I'm not brave even to this day. And I'm not saying that to be humble. I'm saying that because it's true. There are two alternatives to being brave. I never saw myself as being brave, and I will do a video, and this will help some people who deal with fear to understand you don't have to be brave. But getting back to my first bare knuckle experience, I had been taken around by my brother to box with boxing gloves to get me, used to boxing, to teach me to box, have me watch old films of boxers. I will tell you some of these boxers that he had me watch to study. Many of them came on free television. A lot of them, though, the old ones he had films of, and I would watch 8mm films of these particular fighters on a projector that he actually had at his home. But up until this bare knuckle match, I boxed with gloves. One day we were coming home from the park. My only brother, was 18 years older than myself. Okay, he was old enough to be my father, young father, but old enough to be my father. We come back from a park one day, and he runs into a friend of his who had his son with him. And his friend asked him if he was still taking me around to parks to box. And my brother said yes. So his friend said, would I like to hook up my son, with your brother, the next time you're at a park, give me a call. And, they can go a couple rounds. And at that point, I was already nervous because I knew the kid. He was a little bigger than me. Not much. Today, it wouldn't have been a big deal. Maybe an inch taller than myself, maybe 5 pounds heavier, right? Which wouldn't bother me, from my teens on. That was not a big deal. But at 12, it was. And I had known him to be a bully, so I really didn't even want to box him with the gloves. But when his father said that he would meet me, they would come to a park and he would box me with gloves, he actually said he didn't want to box with gloves, bare knuckle, which even scared me worse. So his father figured, he could whip me. So his father said, well, you know what, if he's afraid, well, knowing once he asked me if I was afraid in front of my brother, even though I was afraid, I said, I'll box him. 2-minute rounds. That's what we would do. Okay. I would say I was nervous, but I wasn't nervous. I was more than nervous. I was afraid, right? Knees shaking, the whole nine. Felt like I was going to throw up, the whole nine. But I did realize, even at 12, the thing to do was to play it safe and just jab. Jab very hard, used my first two knuckles to aim towards vital areas, which I knew. How I knew, I really don't know, but I knew enough. I needed to point to the nose, use my first two knuckles to go ahead to the nose, the mouth, the eyes, and that pretty much was my strategy. Even at 12, I was smart enough to know that I didn't want to open up. I was already afraid, didn't want to open up with a left hook or with a cross. I just wanted the jab hard. Aim the jab and possibly bloody him up enough for his father to stop it. And he came after me, you know, without any poise whatsoever. If he was afraid of the bare knuckle, I don't know why he even challenged me, because he just charged me crazy. Like he, you know, like he was afraid, but trying to take my head off, and I just kept jabbing, you know, hard jabbing. And eventually, he had got a cut over his eye, and his father stopped it. My next match was at 13, and then I was a little more polished. I had done some studying of bare knuckle. I was a little more polished, and all together, bare knuckle boxing matches, set matches. Okay, I'm not talking about street fights. I mean set matches were about 6. Challenge matches, rounds, no wrestling was 6 as far as boxing. Bare knuckle karate matches were 3. Okay, so altogether we're talking about like 9 bare knuckle matches. Okay, but the one I had when I was 12, I was afraid, didn't know how I was gonna do. It wasn't of my own doing, my own choosing, and I just want to put it out there. I was not a tough kid, but what I did was I just decided to jab hard. Eventually, I opened a cut, I think, on his right eye, and his father stopped it. As I got older, then I became more polished, jabs, cross, and knew how to aim the punches and save my hands and things of that nature. All right. Now, what is it about bare knuckle? Okay, let me give you a few things about bare knuckle that maybe people told you about, maybe people didn't, but these come from personal experience. Number 1, just being able to steady your nerves when you're looking at someone's bare fist is a major challenge. When looking at someone's bare fist, when looking at these, okay, and being able to control your amygdala, being able to control that part of your brain, all right? There's several of them. There's 2 of them, but the amygdala, right? The alarm system in your brain, being able to control it, okay, when you're looking at these bare fists, because your brain is designed to keep you alive, but to keep you comfortable while you're alive. And once it knows that you are going to engage in some kind of form of combat, without any protection, without any safety protection, it is going to sound the alarm, okay? And you are going to be afraid, all right? More than butterflies, you are really going to be afraid. So being able to steady yourself when you know you're going to be exchanging bare knuckle blows is something that is difficult and needs to be conquered. Now, I want to say this. There are people who say, well, I don't get nervous when I am going to fight somebody. That's because that person can't whip you. That's because that person doesn't have a good chance of whipping you. Okay? I have seen people who really appear to be extremely brave, right? And really, if you look really close at the people they're fighting or the people they're talking trash to, you see that either that person is not as big, not as tall, maybe not as heavy, or if they're the same weight or the same height, they really are not into the fight. They really have this kind of personality where they really don't want to put up a good fight, and therefore is not going to put up a good fight. So you will find that people feel confident when they don't have a great deal of competition. Whenever a person is facing someone who has at least a 50% chance of defeating them in a combat match, both people are nervous. Both people are nervous. So if anyone told me, man, I've had a whole lot of fist fights and I ain't never nervous, it's because either you're crazy or you just had fist fights with people who you had a great chance of whipping. When I talk about steadying your nerves, I want to make it clear. I am talking about boxing people in matches, in set matches, who are just as good, if not better than yourself, and have at least a 50% chance of whipping you. Okay? A person who is so good, a boxer who is so good that there is very little room for error. Very little margin for error. The people that I boxed, those 6 times, other than the one that I boxed when I was 12, but from the 13 on, these people were skilled. They came from boxing families. Their brothers were boxers. They were extremely, extremely good. Left very little room for error, very little margin for error. Were very sharp. Knew where to aim. Knew how to aim. Knew how to preserve their hands so they wouldn't break their hands in the midst of the match. Knew how to clinch and punch on the clinch. Get a little collar tie and throw an uppercut. They knew how to bare knuckle box. Whenever a person knows that the person next to them or the person they are going up against in any kind of combat match, when they know that that person has a 50% chance at least of whipping them, there is a certain amount of steadying of the nerves that has to be done before they can fully function. And the first thing you people have to learn to do when they're boxing bare knuckle, that's what they choose to do, whether professionally or a set match or just settling a conflict, and choosing to do it without weapons, but to do it with the fist. Settling the nerves is one of the most difficult things to learn to do. If you don't learn to do that, you're going to be extremely sloppy. You will never be technically proficient, and you need to be technically proficient, or else you will run into a great deal of punches and end up making that match far harder and far more, quite frankly, far more bloodier and painful than it actually needs to be. The second thing is, when you are in a bare knuckle match, you are almost immediately in discomfort. In a bare knuckle match, you are almost immediately in discomfort or pain. Why do I say that? Because even if you are blocking a punch, you are blocking knuckles, you are blocking bone. Okay, so if I put up my hands in this way and a person punches, and it has happened, a person punches my veins with their bare knuckle, okay, that is excruciating pain. Okay, so different than gloves. All right, unlike gloves, when you are having a bare knuckle match, you are almost immediately, from the first time that person throws a punch at you and you block it, if you don't slip it, and if you don't period with the fat of your palm, if you cover and it hits the back of your hand or hits your arm, right? I am telling you, you're automatically going to have some discomfort. Now, what does that mean? What that means, and this is highly technical, but you asked the question, people, so I'm giving you the answer. What does it mean, boxing, you automatically feeling discomfort, and why am I bringing that up? Because your brain is going to oscillate between the pain in your arm, or the pain wherever you block that fist, wherever that fist made contact. It's going to oscillate between that and you looking for openings and actually throwing punches or slipping punches. So your brain is going back and forth in nanoseconds between the pain that you're feeling and you being strategic enough to continue boxing, to look for the knockout shot, or to look for the shot that's going to bloody them or open them up and ultimately force them to stop. But your brain is constantly going back and forth. If you spend too much time thinking about that discomfort from the lump on your arm or the lump on your hand, or the fact that it might have been a lump and they punched it again and it just busted. That has happened to me. Okay, back when I was a teenager, but it's happened to me. I had a lump, a big bump on the back of my arm, and he punched it again. I went to block it. I don't know if he meant to punch it, but I went to block, and he split open, and blood is running down my arm. But I have to keep blocking. So every time he throws the punch, it's hitting there, and I mean, I haven't felt that much pain before or since. Okay, but the bottom line is, while I'm in pain, I still have to find a way of stopping this guy. I have to place my shots a certain way. I have to know which punch to throw at what particular time. What part of my hand should I throw the hook? Is it now time for me to throw the hook with a cuff here and preserve my hand, or do I have an opening that is clear and I can throw a reverse hook with my first two knuckles? Okay, I'm still thinking as I'm in pain. So the second thing that people need to know, besides having to steady your mind and steady your brain when you're boxing a bare knuckle, the second thing people need to understand when they're talking about bare knuckle, or if they plan on boxing bare knuckle, or you just want to know what the fighters are going through, you're almost immediately in some kind of pain or discomfort as soon as you block a punch. And it also can happen as soon as you throw the punch. Okay, you can hit somebody on top of the skull, and on top of their skull, and your hand swells up. So pain is almost immediately what you're feeling, right? The minute the first exchange happens, and now you have to continue to box, be technically proficient, and still deal with that particular pain and that discomfort. The third thing that you want to know, if you want to talk about bare knuckle, is precision. When a person is a very skilled bare knuckle boxer, they're precise. These are your weapons right here. Okay? These are your weapons. But you need to know when to use that part of your hand. Because you can throw a hook like this and preserve your hand. You can throw a hook with your first two knuckles and preserve, and now you might damage your hand. So you need to know exactly at what point, what are your chances of getting through that guard? Because if your chances are good to get through that guard, and you get to the cheek, or you get to the eye, or you get to the nose, or you get to the lips, then you want to use your first two knuckles, because that's your best weapon. These first two knuckles, and the sharper the better. My knuckles happen to be somewhat sharp. There are some knuckles, for whatever reason, are a little flatter. But my knuckles always were able to do a certain amount of damage because there's a sharpness to them. Sharper knuckles are better for bare knuckle for aiming. But being precise, it's extremely important to preserve your hands so they don't swell up too bad, and that they don't break, right? But the reality is this, is that to do that, you not only need to know what part of your hand to strike with, but you need to know when it's best to strike. When is there opening? How to create an opening. You need to aim. Your eyes have to be open. When you throw a punch, you can't be in this kind of half consciousness. You need to be totally focused and aiming, following through, time on target, making sure that when you throw that punch, you are not making contact and immediately pulling back. So that's 3. Number 1, you need to steady your brain. You need to steady your mind. Number 2, you need to realize that you're going to be in some kind of pain or discomfort or early. And number 3, you need to understand you need to be precise when you are throwing your punches. You need to be precise and make every punch count. Number 4, it is extremely important to adjust your head. Extremely important to adjust your head. When you hear people talk about MMA, people say, well, he doesn't move his head when he punches. If you are boxing bare knuckle, and these fighters are boxing bare knuckle, many times they do not know how to surf their head. If you are blocking a punch, you don't block the punch this way. Because if you can block it this way, but what if it slips through? If you put your hands up in some kind of guard, you need to turn at an angle. This way, the punch, if it gets through, it gets here. This is where it goes. Okay? You don't want to get hit in the nose. You don't want to get hit in the eye. You don't want to get hit in the mouth. Okay? You get hit in the eye, there's, your eyes start to tear up. They start to water. There's your vision. You get hit in the nose, it gets broken. The blood is going to back up down your throat, right? You get hit in the nose, the blood is going to back up. You're going to be swallowing the blood, right? The blood was not made to be ingested, right? You get punched in the mouth, your saliva is alkaline. It's going to burn. This is why when you get cut inside your mouth, it burns so much. It has a chemical in it that really is a good stain remover, but it burns. So you don't want to get hit in your nose. You don't want to get hit in your eyes. You don't want to get hit in your mouth. So when people are blocking, they generally don't know how to surf their head. to move the head in such a way that it is part of a package of defense. You put up your hand and you serve. Put up your hand and you serve. You don't put up your hands and your faces straight because a punch can get through. People don't know in bare knuckle generally that they need to serve their head in defense. Their head and their hands have to work in tandem when it comes down to protecting the vital areas on their face. Okay? Lastly, because this video is relatively long and somewhat technical. Lastly, reading punchlines. It is extremely important to learn the trajectory of punches. Now, it's extremely important to learn the trajectory of punches if you're talking about boxing gloves, but it's even more important to learn how to read punchlines, and I mean the trajectory of punches, the direction in which a punch is coming towards you. Okay? For example, if a person dips generally, if a person lowers themselves to the left or to the right, it's generally going to be an uppercut. If a person's arm separates, if their elbow separates from their waist, it's generally going to be a curving punch. If their shoulder moves forward, straight forward, it's generally going to be a straight punch. Now, these are general rules. There are people throwing unorthodox punches, but you need some kind of roadmap, and that's the roadmap that I use, and that's the roadmap that I taught my students when I would have bare knuckle classes. You need to learn how to read punchlines. Why do you need to learn how to read punchlines? Well, more than just not getting hit, you need to be able to pick up the flow of the punch before it gets close to you. Let me say that again. The reason why you need to be able to read punchlines, the direction in which a punch is taken, the route in which a punch is taken towards you, is because you need to be able to pick those punches up early. You need to pick them up early so they don't, one, hit the target, but so it gives you the opportunity to counter them. The best scenario I will use is tennis. To finish up this video, the best scenario I'd like to use is tennis. You will find that when a person is returning serve, they are usually heading towards where they think the individual is going to serve the ball. And if you think that they're heading towards that particular direction prematurely, because the ball really is not, hasn't been in flight long. The reason is when the person gets up to serve, they're always turning at a certain way. They're trying not to, but it's impossible. If a person who is returning to serve picks up the flow of that particular ball that was served, it gives them a better chance of returning for a point. It is the same thing with boxing. Gloved, bare knuckle, but even more important for bare knuckle, you need to learn to read punchlines. So that's extremely important. So let me run all these back. Number one, in order to be a good bare knuckle boxer, a person has to be able to steady their mind to where they can function under in a situation where they are fighting bare knuckle. Okay. Number two, the person needs to be able to function in a certain amount of discomfort and pain, because in a bare knuckle match, whether it is fixed or whether it is a fixed sport match, or whether it's you're just going to solve an issue, some kind of issue, and not going to shoot each other, stab each other, but you have some kind of rules. Whatever the case might be, when you are boxing bare knuckle, you are going to be in pain early, some discomfort early. You have to be able to stay relatively stable and stay relatively focused and stay relatively dedicated, not relatively, but dedicated to your game plan while you were in discomfort and while you were in pain. Next, you need to be precise. You cannot just throw your punches willy-nilly, hit the elbows, hit the cranium. You have to preserve your hands. Your hands are your tool, and they have to hold up until the bout is over. So you need to learn how to be precise and how to pick your shots. You need to learn how to read punchlines. The trajectory of a punch, which way is a punch coming? You've got to pick up these punches early. The earlier you pick up an offense, the better and easier it is for you to mount a defense that they don't expect is on the return. Adjusting the head. if you're going to throw a punch, if these boxes, I can't tell you how many bare knuckle fighters I have seen who really do not move their head. There is a combination. If you were blocking, or naturally if you're slipping, you're going to move your head because that's part of slipping. But if you were blocking, your head movement, the positioning of your head must coincide with how you were using your arms. If I am going to put my hands up here, I'm not going to put my hands up in this way and remain square, because fists can get through and can penetrate, can split your defense in a position like this and get through. They can get through like this. They can get through like this. So you want to position your head in such a way where you are looking this way. Imagine me having my hands up, but I just want you to see how my head is. Say I put my hands up. Imagine hypothetically my hands are up like this. I want you to see my head. You want to be able to put your hands up at the same time, surf, and look this way, or surf your head and look that way. You must be able to do that, because if your head is straight and you're looking square and something gets through, you get hit in your eyes. We're talking about watering your vision. Your vision's gone. Get hit in the nose, your nose gets broken, blood starts backing up down your throat, and you got a problem. Get hit in your mouth, right? Your mouth is gonna burn, your lips are bleeding, get cut inside your mouth, you're dealing with that kind of pain. So you need to be able to move your head in tandem with how you are maneuvering your arms for defense, okay? It's a lot longer than I thought, but bare knuckle boxing is a different animal altogether. And when we're talking about something as serious as bare knuckle boxing, I do want to be as clear, as technical, and as proficient as I possibly can. Hopefully I didn't lose you on that. If you have any questions, you can reach me again at which brickcitycombatives@gmail.com. All right. See you next video.